men in the photos are known only as the three tramps.
They started snapping pictures right about here.
This is Chauncey Holt, a career criminal now living in California. Holt claims that he is this man, the tramp in the hat. His story is fantastic.
This is the story of Chauncey Marvin Holt, a longtime contract agent for the Central Intelligence Agency and a mafia associate. You're about to see the interview conducted with Mr. Holt just 8 days before he died. This is his story.
Few people know the incestuous relationship that existed and probably exists at the moment between these various very powerful elements: organized crime, intelligence community, the political and powerful business interests. I felt that the American public had a right to know as many of the details that I have available. I grew up in southern Kentucky where bootlegging was a way of life. I mean, it's probably the most important crop, just like marijuana is in certain counties now. And it was nothing unusual about bootlegging because when the Scotch-Irish immigrants came to Kentucky in the early part of the 17th century, they brought their stills with them. And whiskey making was one of their skills, and they always did it.
For the young Chauncey, there was no stigma attached to being a bootlegger.
Not only, distilled the whiskey, what we delivered it, usually to somewhere like Knoxville, Tennessee, which was close, about 40 miles, and we was as far away as Cincinnati.
Chauncey Holt got around, and getting around got him in trouble. He ended up in reform school in Chillicothe, Ohio.
Now they have prisons for youthful offenders. That was what it would have been in those days, but they called it a reform school. And I'd been in there I got railroaded by the FBI for joyriding in a car. That was Hoover's big thing in those days, was catching youthful car thieves. Usually someone else caught them and they took the credit. And although we were right in the middle of the war, I mean, Hoover took the time to send wire after wire down to Louisville wanting to know why we hadn't been prosecuted. Gives you an idea what importance he placed on those type things.
This teletype, April 23rd, 1942, from Hoover to FBI Louisville office says, in part, Chauncey Marvin Holt et al. Advised by return teletype status prosecution of this case. In the event final prosecution complete, submit report immediately reflecting results of prosecution. It's signed Hoover.
While I was there, I met several people that were connected with organized crime. So he said, if you want, I'll put you in touch with these guys in Baltimore who work hand in glove with Meyer Lansky. One was Cy Bloom and his brother Morris. Cy Bloom handled all the bookmaking operations for Lansky in the Baltimore area. And then it was through that connection that he came down to, Lansky came down to Baltimore to visit with Cy Bloom and to see his son Buddy Lansky, who at that time was in the Phipps Clinic. He was disabled. He's in the Phipps Clinic, and I knew him. I had gotten acquainted with him, with Buddy, and we used to go over and play chess with him and that sort of thing, because I was doing some painting work for the restoring a painting right across the street.
Chauncey Holt's skills as a painter would serve him well. A Renaissance man, he developed other skills. He became an arms expert in the military, as well as learning how to fly an airplane. Holt also did another kind of flying, but not inside a cockpit.
My uncles, by marriage, owned a small one-ring circus. And from the time I was 6 years old, I mean, I was running up and down the tight wire, you know, swinging on the trapeze. I worked in this family circus, and I did a single trapeze act. I worked in a flying act. I did a low wire act, a high wire act, shot from the cannon, all that sort of thing, you know.
The circus performer in Chauncey Holt thought getting shot out of a cannon was a hell of a lot safer and easier than getting shot at. Chauncey's Baltimore connection with Meyer Lansky would lead to a long relationship with the mobster and other important mob figures, including the head of the Detroit family, Peter Licavoli.
I did a little work for him in painting. He sent some paintings over to me to be restored, and that started a relationship with Licavoli that lasted, it lasted 50 years. It lasted from 44 until the date of his death in 1984. I had a lot of other qualities that they liked. First of all, I was a pilot. Secondly, I was a very good shooter. I was a weapons expert. And of course the art didn't help, it didn't hurt, because it extended to forgery if necessary. And of course I was a very good accountant, very good money manager. And probably I did more money managing and more fiscal type work down through the years than I did the other types of work.
Chauncey's math skills, he was brilliant with figures, caught Meyer Lansky's attention.
So Lansky was coming down to Baltimore to see Buddy, and he was going to, check up on the operation, the bookmaking operation, and Cy Bloom called me. I was working in the shipyard. He called me and asked me if I'd like to come over and meet Meyer Lansky. So he told Meyer Lansky that I was a mathematical genius. Well, I may have seemed like a mathematical genius to him, but anyway, so Lansky came in and we were talking, and it turned out that he was like me in the sense that he used to work mathematical problems just like he'd work a crossword puzzle. He'd get a book with nothing but problems in it, mostly algebraic problems. So he said, I want to work out this little problem for you, and you show me the fallacy in it, because you start out with the premise and you end up and it looks like 2 equals 1. So we go down through these equations, and it started out with A equals B. Well, down in the middle of this computation, you divide by A minus B. Well, if A equals B, A minus B is 0. So I pointed it out and I said, there's a fallacy, and he said, oh yeah, that's right. He says, anything divided by 0, the answer is 0. And so I told him, well, technically he was wrong for the simple reason that the answer is not 0, it's infinity. And so he was very, very impressed. And he said, now if you ever come down to Florida, I'd said I've thought about coming to Florida after the war. He says, if you come down to Florida, he said, be sure and look me up. You can tutor me in analytical, differential and integral calculus, subject he was interested in. So I knew that I'd made a very, very valuable connection.
Chauncey Holt got a close-up and a personal look at one of the most powerful members of organized crime.
Lansky, although he had a very violent past, having been, a member of the Bugs and Meyer gang, and he could be as ruthless as the next person, and he could, in getting what he wanted. However, he was extremely intelligent. He was polite. He was very low key. He was compassionate. Many things that you don't find in the average gangster. He never actually thought of himself as a gangster, although to do that you'd have to exclude his early life, because he just considered himself simply a gambler who was providing the public with something that they begged for. Well, I knew him from starting in '44. I knew him until he went to Israel. As a matter of fact, I had a short letter from him just before he went to Israel saying he had decided to go to Israel and live.
Lansky writes to Marvin Holt in a letter dated May 25th, 1970. Dear Marvin, I have decided to go and live in Israel. I will be here at Ray's for a few days. Ray's is Ray Ryan's El Mirador Hotel in Palm Springs. The letter goes on to say, I would like to see you before I go. Fly down here if you can. I don't dare come to L.A. If I don't get to see you before we leave, I want to thank you for the past favors. Keep your nose clean. I will write you from Israel if I don't get to see you. Your friend, Meyer. Lansky wanted to migrate to Israel, but was having difficulties entering the country. Like the letter he wrote to Chauncey, Lansky's personal appeal to the Prime Minister of Israel is also handwritten. Lansky tells Menachem Begin he wants very much to live in Israel and blames his image problems on the media. Chauncey became acquainted with another notorious crime figure, the man many say created a gambling oasis in the Nevada desert, Bugsy Siegel.
Soon after the war, I went south and hooked up with with Lansky. Started working for his organization. I worked for his main accounting firm, and I also was office manager of one of his front organizations, which was used for a lot for stock manipulations and that sort of thing. And I also worked at the Colonial Inn, which was the plushest of the carpet joints there in Florida at that time.
The Colonial Inn in Hollandale, Florida was a hot spot. Show business types, mobsters, and politicians flocked to the glamorous gambling nightclub resort. It was Lansky's prototype for Las Vegas gambling and casinos. All the while, Holt was privy to the Lansky-Las Vegas Bugsy Siegel connection.
Actually, I met him before they started the Flamingo. The first trip that I made west with him to meet Siegel, he was going out because Siegel wanted him to go into buying the El Cortez Hotel.
On their first trip to Las Vegas, Lansky told Holt he wasn't worried about J. Edgar Hoover. The mob had compromising photos of the FBI director and his aide Clyde Tolson taken at the Del Charro Lodge in La Jolla, California. The mob was worried about Siegel's mishandling their money in Las Vegas.
The Brotherhood, who had put up $6 million, they were beginning to get concerned about their money. So we went out to talk to Siegel again, and to look into the rumors that he and Virginia Hill had been squirreling away money for their retirement. So we went out and we talked to all the vendors and so forth. This principal one was the general contractor was Del Webb, and we talked to him, and we discovered at once that Siegel, he hadn't paid Del Webb nearly as much money as he said. So it was obvious that he was stealing. So we came back. And shortly after that, they had a big meeting in Havana when all the everybody, every top mob figure in the well, not only in the country, but luckily Luciano came from Italy, came to Havana to have a conference about what they were going to do about Lansky. I mean about Siegel. Lansky pleaded for him, said, hey, look, he served us long and well. Why don't we give him just a little piece of the action and let him get out? And he came back, so he said, okay. So Lansky and I made another trip to California. And he told Lansky and I, right to our face, that we could shove it, that the flamingo was his and he was keeping it, and that was that. Because he had a violent, uncontrollable temper, and so as far as that went, I mean, that was his death warrant.
That conversation was on 19th of June, 1947. A day later, Siegel was dead.
On the 20th, we followed Siegel around all day, to the barber shop, to his lawyer. He went over to a place on Fountain Avenue to meet a girlfriend. He didn't seem like he had a worry in the world.
Siegel was murdered, 3 shots to the head. Chauncey denied any involvement in the actual murder of Siegel. He didn't pull the trigger, he swears. But he hints at his role at Lookout performing surveillance for the mob hitmen. He never denies his relationship with another important crime figure.
Peter Licavoli was one of the most important organized crime figures in the country. He was probably the last of a dying breed. He grew up in St. Louis, a big Sicilian family. He was imported by the Purple Gang into Detroit in the early 30s to act as enforcers. Then they finally took over, and he became one of 5 ruling dons of Detroit. Detroit operated differently than, say, New York. New York had 5 separate families headed by 5 separate people. They had one family that was headed by 5 ruling dons, of which one was Peter Licavoli. Yeah, he was into everything. I mean, he was into loan sharking, and he was into anything that prostitution, anything that the mob is normally, involved in. And he had a really great love for art, and he was a sucker when it came to buying art, especially Italian art. He loved buying Italian art, and we used to buy that stuff by the roomful, because he was trying to clean up his image. And he was a competent painter. I have some of his paintings.
It was during the Kefauver Committee hearings into organized crime that Chauncey's career took a turn. Meyer Lansky had been ordered to testify.
He was one of the few guys that didn't end up in jail, because most of them ended up in jail because of contempt of Congress. But he got up there and he answered all their questions, and he appeared first without a lawyer, then he had his lawyer. But he was quick on his feet.
Chauncey is quick too, immediately accepting an offer of a unique job offered him by Lansky. The year is 1953.
I can put you in a job. If you want to have a job, I could put you in over here at the International Rescue Committee as controller at a real good job, at a real good salary. I thought it was a philanthropic organization like the Red Cross or something, like the name implies. They like those innocuous names of the CIA. So I was sitting there when a guy walked in from Washington. His name was Richard Sluter. Came in and he explained to me the facts of life, that this was a proprietary interest of the CIA.
Chauncey's aliases were many. He would use 25 different names while working for the mob and the CIA.
We had two types of aliases. We had floating aliases that more than one agent used, and a number of agents used over the years that you just slap a picture on. Now I used Charles Hormley, Robert Ralston, Marvin Hoyt, which is not too far from my own name. However, as far as deep cover agents aliases went, I had 3 deep cover agents that would withstand the vigorous scrutiny. One was the one that I used the longest time, was John R. Moon. I used Kearney L. Siegler, and I used Dean Rutz.
The CIA hadn't been in business too long, but already had a clear target, Guatemala. Chauncey assumed a new identity and began training for his mission at a secret CIA base in Arizona.
So I became Robert Ralston, and I had all these credentials in that name. So I went out to Aranya, which was a big base. Well, it became an awful big base later. It wasn't much of a base in those years. Was right near Tucson that the CIA used. It was a training facility, and I went out to get some multi-engine training because in preparation for going down to Guatemala.
Chauncey's personal records include copies of CIA contract agent paperwork. This type of supporting documentation involving a CIA contract agent has never been made public before.
I first went to Guatemala as a part of a 5-man assassination team, I guess you'd call us, that went down to figure what we were going to do. It looked like that our Benz was going to win the next year's election, and we were trying to get a CIA-approved candidate to run in against him.
But the plan was a failure, and our Benz remained in power.
So here we were with this guy who was an out-and-out communist sitting there. And at that time, Eisenhower, Dulles, and those guys all up and down the line said, you know, this guy's got to go. So we found another guy who was in prison down there, and his name is Cecilio Armas, and he was educated in the United States. He had gone to the Command and General Staff School at Leavenworth and so forth. He's caught in a coup, and they sentenced him to death, and he was in jail. So we went down and got the guy out of jail, which was very easy. All we did was just grease a few palms, and he walked right out into a limousine. You know, it wasn't a 007 type deal. You know.
Armas, backed with a 300-man army and the CIA, invaded Guatemala from Nicaragua.
I was flying a C-47, and we had a C-47 because we could either push ordnance out the door, or we could actually use it for leaflets. And of course, we were flying over Guatemala City, just distributing those leaflets for our Benz to give up and so forth, and which he did. He threw in the sponge in August. He fled the country, and of course, then Eisenhower was able to say that Guatemala was now back in the hands of the people.
Even while working for the CIA, Chauncey continued to work for organized crime.
I always kept in touch, and if if Meyer Lansky or any of his group wanted something of me, they certainly would. They didn't hesitate to ask me. When Castro landed up in the Escambray Mountains and started his little revolution, he got some aid from Lansky, simply because Lansky was just sort of hedging his bet. As a matter of fact, he had an agreement with Castro that if he took over the government, he'd let him continue operating the casinos. After Castro actually came to power in 1959, he let them operate for about 2 months, and then he confiscated the hotels, confiscated them, and so naturally they were interested in getting back to Cuba. Lansky himself, personally, had a $1 million contract out on Castro. So here we had these people, and then we had the CIA, and we had the mob, all trying to get rid of Castro.
Cuba wasn't the only interest. So was the Dominican Republic and its dictator, Rafael Trujillo.
The government was pushing very, very vigorously to get rid of Castro, and they had enlisted the aid of Trujillo and Johnny Abbas, who was his head of security, who was one of the best assassins in the world. But they suddenly, somewhere in the about this time, the State Department decided, hey, we've had enough of Trujillo. Trujillo has to go, so we're going to. So they started putting plans in the hopper to kill Trujillo. So that removed one very, very dangerous foe of Castro.
A CIA letter dated March 17, 1961, sent to a CIA team, including Chauncey, says, in case you plan to hunt this territory, recommend high-powered foreign-made rifle with telescopic scope and silencer. Have already obtained necessary licenses and paid the fees. That means the Trujillo assassination had the go-ahead. He was murdered 2 weeks later. The mob had never forgotten how Castro had double-crossed them, so they set in motion a series of deadly plans to assassinate the Cuban leader.
Lansky had he had actually offered a contract of $1 million for anyone who would dispose of Castro. Now, he had a viable, in my opinion, it was the most workable plan to assassinate Castro that was ever conceived. And they had assassin chosen. They got the weapon in. It came in with some circus equipment. It was they had rented an apartment which was within 300 yards of the television station where he used to walk back and forth and harangue for hour on end, and so forth. And but at the last minute, it was called off, and it was called off through pressure from the State Department.
The CIA didn't want to give up. They wanted a location in South Florida to keep close tabs on Castro. They again turned to Meyer Lansky.
Down in the Florida Keys at Marathon had built this airport strictly for his use, but the CIA began to use it, and we started making flights from Marathon. It wasn't too far, from Marathon into Cuba, and we would insert agents into Cuba. We would deliver arms and ammunition into Cuba. We made literally dozens and dozens of flights into Cuba in 1960.
Intrigue, ineptitude, and infighting, CIA and State Department doomed any efforts.
Everybody seemed to be working at cross purposes, and finally, at the just before the 1960 election, they came up with this idea of invading Cuba, and what started out from being a very small, over-the-beach Dieppe type raid turned into a full full assault.
That full assault, the Bay of Pigs invasion, would be a complete failure, a major embarrassment for the Kennedy administration, and the impetus for Operation Mongoose.
Operation Mongoose was a ill-conceived joint operation between organized crime and the CIA to actually simply kill Castro. And they had some various memos. As a matter of fact, I have a few memos how it ended up, how they were talking about what they were going to do, and so forth.
Here are some of the memos Chauncey refers to. These men participated in a meeting held at a small airport between Palm Springs and Indio, California. The name? Bermuda Dunes.
In that meeting, Peter Licavoli and I flew in from Arizona. Sam Giancana, Johnny Roselli came in from Chicago. William King Harvey came from Langley. William King Harvey was a legend in the CIA. He was the only member, he was the only CIA member there, but of course he was the one that was laying out the plan.
Who was William King Harvey? Chauncey was well aware of his involvement in other CIA operations.
William King Harvey was the head of Task Force W. That had been renamed. Originally, that was a part of ZR Rifle, operation called ZR Rifle. ZR Rifle was nothing more than an assassination group that went around the world assassinating people. And Harvey happened to be the head of ZR Rifle.
On December 14, 1961, top echelon leaders of the CIA and the mafia met at Bermuda Dunes Airport in Palm Springs to discuss ground rules for Operation Mongoose. Chauncey's memos from that meeting show an executive action was planned. Executive action means assassination. The target, the beard, Castro. The ground rules, CIA only, maximum security, non-attributability, plausible denial, need-to-know basis. Harvey set the tone of the meeting at the Bermuda Dunes Airport.
They were going to eliminate the beard and how it was going to be done, and what, just starting as to what personnel they were going to hire. First of all, they were trying to decide what cryptonym they were going to use for this, because they had decided that they would assign it a cryptonym and it would end up in the official CIA files. AM, normally operations involving Cuba had an AM start to their cryptonym. So we said, well, we don't want to use AM. What are we going to use? They started looking down the list, and MO was some cryptonym for some obscure place way out in the Pacific somewhere. So we said, hey, that would be a good, use MO. And somebody said, well, what goes with MO? And so it flows, you know. So somebody said, hey, how about Mongoose? You know, the Mongoose never loses, you know. That's a good one, you know. So everybody agreed, is, hey, we'll call it Operation Mongoose.
It's also decided any further discussions about Operation Mongoose would be face-to-face, nothing in writing. The CIA's William King Harvey was clearly in charge.
It was a very short meeting because of the fact that
20 minutes an hour?
Yeah, 20 minutes an hour. It didn't take very long. I mean, he laid it out in precise terms. These guys wanted to get out, you know, and you know, take on off. And guys like Giancana and Rosselli, I mean, they're reluctant, you know, to get together. These high, and Licavoli too, these high-ranking mobsters don't like to meet with each other, and rarely do they. So we kept it short and sweet, and that was it.
An August 14th, 1962 inter-office CIA memo from William King Harvey to the Director of Clandestine Operations says, in part, "Our contract agents in Miami and Los Angeles have been assured by me that no reference to this operation appears in our central files."
Our first order of business was to set up a documentation mill. So we started looking around for a plant, and we found one that was ideal, and it was in financial trouble. It was called the Los Angeles Stamp and Stationery Company. It was a very old LA firm that owned a very valuable building in downtown Los Angeles, which was ideally set up because what we could do, the first 4 floors of this building was devoted to legitimate business. We went right on with their printing. They printed, they did banners, they did badges, they did high quality printing such as stock certificates, bonds, that sort of thing. But more importantly, in that which for us was the fact that they made police badges for just about every police department in the United States. And then the top floor was devoted to our clandestine operation. So we had a group of employees that knew nothing about what went on upstairs. But upstairs we did all the disinformation stuff, all the fake IDs, and that sort of thing.
The agency also wanted a machine shop to handle weapon modifications.
We discovered this place at Goleta, which is California, which is at the Santa Barbara airport. So there again, it was located on the airport, so we could land there, taxi in, pull right in. We had a big hangar, just pull right into that facility, which is great, you know, for loading and unloading arms and that sort of thing. And there again, this was an operating machine shop that continued its own work. But when we came along, we says, "Hey, we want 500 silencers." We got 500 silencers.
By late 1962, both covert operations were up and running. Both were used by the mob and the CIA. Holt's immediate supervisor on behalf of the agency was Phil Twombly.
Philip Twombly had been at one time the executive vice president for Caribbean operations of Coca-Cola, which used to boast that it was the eyes and ears of the CIA in the Caribbean. So we know that he was well connected. We never actually knew how well until we came to the West Coast, and we were told that all of our funds would be coming from Philip Twombly. And all of our orders would be coming from Philip Twombly and a longtime agent by the name of Richard Wilson. The head of the CIA in Los Angeles was a guy by the name of Ernst Leibacher. And we were told that except in an extreme emergency, we were not to contact Leibacher, that our operations were outside the normal loop of the CIA. So suddenly, I mean, at first we had no trouble setting up all these things, but then we started making requests for capital equipment that we felt that we needed, and it had just slowed to a trickle for some reason. I mean, we just weren't getting any funds.
But suddenly, in early 1963, the purse strings loosened.
We're not talking about piddly little procurements. We're talking about big ticket items. Among them was we wanted a corporate jet to fly back and forth in a fast we wanted to get and the best one at that time was the Gulfstream, which was a turboprop job. The startling thing about it was they were telling us, hey, we got money. At the end of '63, at the end of April in '63, I received a note from Philip Twombly, which in which he said that we would soon be receiving a special order from our distributor in New Orleans.
A letter from Twombly dated April 29, 1963, is addressed to Jack Moon, Chauncey's favorite alias. I want you to personally supervise this project and make the delivery yourself to New Orleans. It's signed, Regards, Phil.
Our distributor in New Orleans happened to be Guy Bannister, who was is a well-known person, known to all the assassination researchers, because he was a very mysterious guy and was probably Lee Harvey Oswald's control.
Twombly's letter to Chauncey Holt, a.k.a. Jack Moon, ended with this instruction: the customer wants all the original artwork destroyed when the job is completed.
It bothered me from day one was the vilification of Lee Harvey Oswald, because I know that Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. I know that he was executed just the same as everyone else.
Chauncey is absolutely convinced that Oswald was framed.
Although my revelations probably won't add too much to what's already been said, but all I wanted to do was to, I felt that the American people are entitled to know.
The editing for the next portion of the Holt interview will be minimal. You will hear Chauncey Holt's words as he spoke them. He's talking about his New Orleans assignment. It's late spring, 1963.
It turned out that this work was for Lee Harvey Oswald. We did documentation, identity documents in the name of Lee Harvey Oswald, Lee Henry Oswald, Leon Osborne, and Alex Heidel. We weren't sure at the time who were actually doing it, who this person was, for the simple reason that the same picture that appeared on Lee Harvey Oswald also appeared on Leon Osborne. So we didn't know whether this guy was actually Leon Osborne or he might have been neither. So we didn't know exactly who this was. So we delivered some of this documentation was redoing some other documentation that someone else had done, and it was very amateurish and wouldn't pass muster. If you looked at it very closely, you'd know it was a forgery. So it was merely cleaning it up. Some of it was new. One of the new things that we did for him was to show a card showing that Lee Harvey Oswald was a member of the Communist Party. Well, that presented a little problem for us because I didn't even know what that card looked like, and we hunted and hunted and hunted trying to find what it looked like, and we were finally told by experts that, hey, those communists don't carry any cards, but they wanted it, so we just had to wing it and make them a nice-looking card that showed him a member of the Communist Party. So we completed that in May or June. In August, we made a trip to New Orleans to deliver some guns and so forth. I had a note, we had a note from George Reynolds. George Reynolds operated 4 proprietary interests at Morgan City, Louisiana. And he relayed, he was a high level, apparently he operated a high level because a lot of instructions came from him and a lot of money came from him. A lot of money came from his organization direct to whomever I said send it to. So he worked at a high level. Besides, he was extremely well connected to the intelligence community. His sister was married to Frank Belcher, who was one of the most powerful figures, legal figures in California. Now, Frank Belcher was also, he was partners with Joe Ball, not actually partners in their law firm. They had separate law firms, but they operated together.
Joe Ball, like Belcher, was an influential legal figure. He was president of the California State Bar and gained national exposure as a senior counsel to the Warren Commission. According to Chauncey, both Belcher and Ball were part of an interlocked web with far-reaching connections. Chauncey elaborates further about this shadowy network.
George Reynolds had a brother whose name was Bob Reynolds. He was chief of station at J.M. Wave, and he was a high-level CIA employee. Besides, Frank Belcher was related to J.A. Belcher of J.A. Belcher Oil Company. They had old-time oil money from Texas. He also was known to be a CIA asset. It was well known, and so all these things were working together. So I get a letter from George Reynolds telling me that he and Leroy Young, who happened to be his second in command, he was a weapons expert, helicopter pilot, soldier of fortune type, and that they were going to be in New Orleans for about a 20-day period, and I was going to New Orleans to deliver some guns to Louis McWillie, who was a high-level high-level organized crime figure. All these people, of course, were connected to the CIA. CIA knew what was going on. So I was going to deliver these guns over there. So while I was there, and I had some stuff for Guy Bannister, he sent me this note stating he was going to be there and that he was going to be at the LaSalle Hotel and to meet a guy by the name of Thomas Eli Davis. Thomas Davis, he was another one of those soldier of fortune types that worked for the CIA. So while we was over there on the 9th day of August in '63, I had never seen Oswald. So I was down talking to Guy Bannister, and he said, well, Oswald was over on the next street handing out leaflets, so why don't I go over and take a look at him? I don't have to introduce myself, but go over and at least I'd see him. So I went over, and it turned out that Lee Harvey Oswald and a guy named Carlos Bringuer got into a shoving match there, and they both ended up getting arrested, actually for nothing really. So I went back over, and Guy Bannister said, well, I guess we should go down and get Oswald, bail him out, and so forth. But before we could bail him out, Oswald's uncle, Dutch Moretz, worked for Carlos Marcello. So they sent a guy down to get him out of jail. He was fine. And that was on a Friday. And on Monday, he was appear in night court. I went down to night court to just see what was going on, and they gave and talked to him. And I talked to him for a while, and they gave gave him a little fine, and he left.
That was your first?
That was the first time I saw Oswald.
In night court?
Yeah, that's first. Well, I saw him, but the first time I introduced myself to him, went up and said who I was and so forth, and talked to him for a while. And he was an interesting kid to talk to. He'd just turned 24. Well, he wasn't even 24 then. He was 23 then. He didn't turn 24 until October. But we had an interesting little talk, and then on Friday, he was back in front of the Trade Mart handing out leaflets again. I happened to be in the Trade Mart talking to a guy by the name of Lloyd Cobb. Lloyd Cobb, they called him the Potato Man because he owned 8,000 acres of potatoes up around Jackson, Louisiana. He was as far right-wing as you can get, and he was very, very high up. Those guys at the Trade Mart, John Lawrence may have been the president of the Trade Mart, and Clay Shaw may have been the director, but they all took their orders from Lloyd Cobb. So I went in, and just as I came out of the building, I look, and there's a television camera there taking pictures of WSDU was there taking pictures of this little handing out these pamphlets. Well, I just ducked down the side, and I thought I wasn't caught on film, but it turned out that I was.
A television news crew was outside the International Trade Mart and captured on film Oswald passing out Fair Play for Cuba protest leaflets. Transferred to stills, it clearly shows Oswald at work. From a different angle, you see bystanders reading the leaflets. In this still taken from the film, Oswald's head is turned away from the camera. And from another still, Chauncey, in sunglasses, is seen exiting the Trade Mart building. He's on the far right. On Chauncey's left, Leroy Young, George Reynolds' assistant.
Well, all this stuff really concerned Philip Twombly.
Twombly resolved the problem of Chauncey being identified on that news film with the help of New Orleans FBI agent Warren DeBruze. The disinformation campaign worked, as Twombly wrote Chauncey. Dear Jack, the Potato Man advised our distributor in New Orleans that Warren has submitted a report and has positively identified the man coming out of the Trade Mart as the public relations man, not Chauncey. Again, the distributor in New Orleans was Guy Bannister.
Lloyd Cobb was able to pull all these strings and had them misidentified by employees of the Trade Mart that he was their boss, and so we managed to extricate ourselves from that possibility. I couldn't understand is why that they were so worried about it, and why that they were doing so much with it. They had so much interest in Oswald. Oswald was an interesting kid, but to try to say that they were trying to separate us from the Fair Play for Cuba act and didn't want us involved and so forth, indicated clearly to me, didn't then, but later on, I got the idea as, hey, this guy was important to them, and later on, I understood why, because they undoubtedly had other plans for him, and the fact that this inquiry was initiated by Philip Twombly indicated to me that Twombly was cognizant of these plans that were in the works.
About the same time of the New Orleans episode with Oswald, Chauncey received an unusual order from a Texas gun dealer.
In the summer of 1963, we received an order, I guess you'd call it an order, or a request from a gunsmith in Dallas by the name of John T. Mason, spelled with an E, and asking us to buy all the existing models of the Mannlicher Carcano rifle. The Mannlicher Carcano was an Italian-made military rifle, probably the poorest made military rifle that was ever designed. They called it the Mannlicher. The name of Mannlicher shouldn't even been on it. Mannlicher was a great Austrian gunmaker, but the only thing that he had anything to do with the Mannlicher Carcano was that he designed the magazine. But they said, buy these existing, buy these guns. They had us doing a lot of chronograph work on them, measuring muzzle velocity and that sort of thing, using all kinds of loads, underloading, overloading, and so forth. And that's a normal sort of thing. We bought these rifles from Sam Cummins, who had another CIA front over on at Western Surplus out on Arroyo Seca in Pasadena. We bought these things for $3 a piece. This would give you an idea what kind of a gun these were. So you'd be better off with a bow and arrow. So then they sent us a bunch of the Mannlicher. One particular Carcano shot a 6.5 millimeter used bullet, and we received a bunch of 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano bullets. At first glance, if you look at them at first glance, you think that they're unfired, that they're new bullets just cast. But if you examine them very carefully, you could see that they had been fired at least once, and they had been fired into either water or a wadding or something, so they didn't get just formed, you know, formed out of shape, distorted, or whatever you want to call it. Then they asked us to load a number of these into a 264 Remington case. 264 and 6.5 are the same. But however, the Remington, I mean, you can use that from a quality sniper's rifle, such as a Remington 700, one of those. I mean, instead of sticking with that cheap Carcano. So it's obviously these people who do this have something in mind. So we loaded a lot of those cases. We also loaded cases for them what they call Mexican loads. Mexican loads are, you take, in this case, we took a 308 case and we necked it down so that it would take the 6.5, and then we put the 6.5 in it, and of course this would could be fired from a 308. And there's a lot of good 308s around. As a matter of fact, the M14, which was the top flight military rifle at that time, used the 308. However, the only drawback in that, of course, is the fact of firing that small projectile out of a lot. You don't know where the hell it's going. I mean, you certainly know you're going to deliver it somewhere, but you can't be sure of hitting anything. So it's apparent that Mason's they've got something going there. So we produced all that stuff and delivered it to him in the summer of 1963.
On April 23, 1963, the first news release came out concerning President Kennedy's trip to Dallas.
What happened at that time, Kennedy himself was, on the one hand, he was talking about having a big speech before the 2506 Brigade, saying this is going to be delivered, this flag is going to be delivered to a free Cuba, we'll never let up, and blah, 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 all that political rhetoric, when in fact, his emissary, William Atwood, was at that time negotiating with Raul Castro to ease up on some of the restrictions and build up improve the relationship with the United States. Well, I mean, this is not what the CIA wants to hear. So what they decided to do was that we're going to create this disturbance, and which was probably an attempt on the life of the president, or a seemingly attempt on his life, that would be laid to the door of the pro-Castro Cubans. That way, it would inject a little life back into their program. So that was what we were told. So as part of our role in it was going to be was that we were going to forge a lot of identification, Secret Service identification. Not only the cards that they carry, but the lapel pins that they wear. The problem in this, of course, is the fact that they change that lapel every 2 or 3 days. Of course, the only person who would actually know would be another Secret Service agent. I mean, I'd look at it, I wouldn't know, you wouldn't know, but they thought it was important enough to, hey, to have the real thing. So we were waiting on this before we could make our delivery to Dallas.
Chauncey was to deliver the fake Secret Service identification to Dallas. But even before Dallas, the president had been scheduled to speak in Miami. However, the Secret Service got wind of an assassination plot against the president in that Florida city.
We prepared some stuff for the Miami thing, which was supposed to take place on November the 9th.
This incident?
Yeah, this incident. And we provided the same type of identification as we did for Dallas. The only problem is that they intercepted a telephone conversation that indicated that there was going to be an attempt on Kennedy's life, and they didn't have the motorcade. They took him directly to where he was going to speak by helicopter and returned him by helicopter, and they had to cancel that operation. So we were waiting for the second one, which was going to be in Dallas, because it seemed that was going to be a viable project. And we were waiting for the word from Twombly what the color of the identification badges were going to be for that particular day. That was the only thing remaining that we had to put together and to be delivered, and how many we were going to produce.
Chauncey and his Confederates knew that JFK was going to be in Texas.
Early on, we knew that he was going to be in San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, and Dallas. However, the exact date, we didn't learn the exact date until probably maybe as late as the 15th or 16th. I'm really not sure exactly when we learned, because his agenda hadn't been exactly set.
Chauncey was waiting to hear when and how many sets of fake Secret Service IDs were needed in Dallas. Then the orders arrived.
They came from Philip Twombly. He did not tell us precisely how we were to get it there, except that it was to be delivered, hopefully it was to be delivered on the night of the 21st.
Twombly's memo, it's dated November 12, 1963, to Jack, Los Angeles Stamp and Stationery Company, says, in part, number needed undetermined at this time, but will not be in excess of 15. Twombly's referring to the sets of fake Secret Service IDs. He says, schedule accordingly.
The color of the Secret Service acting ones, the ones that are charged with the protection of the president, they wear these lapel pins, easily recognizable. They look like a little, kind of like a good conduct medal, but and they change them from time to time because they figure you have the same color too long, somebody's going to make a handful of them. So they keep changing them. So we didn't find out until about the 16th that the color it was going to be, which turned out to be the same colors as they have on the flag of Texas.
Those were the pins Chauncey was ordered to deliver to Dallas.
Our intention first was to fly directly from Los Angeles to Dallas, which is no problem. Then on November the 12th, I received a letter from Peter Licavoli, in which he told me to be sure and stop by the ranch, that Charlie Masseri and Charlie Nicoletti and Leo Masseri wanted to go to Dallas and on their way to New Orleans. He indicated that he had picked up for us a large station wagon, which was registered in the name of John O'Malley, and all the documents indicated John O'Malley. I had a driver's license and identification of the name of John O'Malley, which is the name I decided that I was going to use on this particular trip.
Chauncey picked up the mafia hitman at Grace Ranch, owned by Licavoli. The ranch also provided safe haven for contract agents of the CIA.
So we arrived there expecting that we would all four fly to Dallas. However, when we got there, we discovered that Nicoletti and Masseri had a hell of a lot of luggage, and it was heavy luggage and weighed a lot. So we thought that it was going to be too risky flying it, doing it that way. So we had this station wagon. We said, oh, what the hell? I mean, we'll drive from Tucson to Dallas. So we all took off. We encountered first at Lordsburg, New Mexico. We had car trouble, which held us up for a few hours while they were trying to get the part. Then just west of El Paso, we hit a storm that was a windstorm that was so bad that we had to stop. You couldn't drive. Took the paint right off the car.
A check of the El Paso Times weather report for November 21st. Quote, a frontal system passed through the city about 7:30 a.m. with winds recorded from 29 to 35 miles per hour.
It was a coup d'etat, and I do not believe that that is the way, not in this country, for a change of command.
JFK and Jackie Kennedy arrive in Dallas by plane. It's November 22nd. Early the same morning, Chauncey also reaches Dallas. He drops off the mob hitmen and checks into the Adolphus Hotel.
I received a note from Twombly telling me that he was going to be, that week, he was going to be at the bottling convention in Dallas. he told me that he had made a reservation for Joe Chanty and I at the Adolphus Hotel, where we could stay and rest up a little if we wanted to be before we came back to the coast. He also indicated that he was going to be staying at a private home, which I believe was probably with Clinton Murchison, because he was a very close friend of Clinton Murchison, and that also that he would be meeting Kendall there. Kendall, of course, was a Pepsi-Cola, was another one that bragged about being the eyes and ears of the CIA.
Twombly's note to Chauncey tells him to stay as long as you like at the Adolphus. Twombly also reserves a room for Joe Chanty, a fellow pilot and CIA contract agent. Everything is taken care of. Just sign the tab. Twombly continues, Kendall and I are staying with friends. Twombly's instructions to Chauncey were simple.
We were supposed to meet an individual by the name of Homer Echevarria. Homer Echevarria had he was violently anti-Castro, anti-Kennedy. No one hated Kennedy any more than Homer Echevarria.
According to records from the House Select Committee on Assassinations, the Secret Service received a tip that on November 21st, 1963, Homer S. Echevarria was overheard bragging his group had plenty of money, and that his backers would proceed with the arms deal as soon as we take care of Kennedy.
At that time, he and a guy by the name Paulino Sierra, they were running around putting together what they said was a expeditionary force that was going to invade Cuba. The Cubans, of course, that was just the thing that he actually wanted to. They wanted to hear. So we were to put it in a station wagon owned by Homer Echevarria. They were to. They gave us the tag number and so forth of the pickup truck, and and keys. We had a set of keys, master keys, and we were just going to put the false identification. There was nothing else, no guns, anything else. Would put it in there and lock it up, and that would be it.
A picture taken years later in a parking lot behind the notorious Grassy Knoll shows Chauncey pointing to the area where his station wagon was parked.
They had a parking area that was used by law enforcement personnel that was locked, which we had a key to. And we were able to go in there, and we went around, we looked for the pickup truck, and we didn't see it. So we relocked the gate, and Chanty and I decided that we would go out to Redbird Airport.
At Redbird Airport was a plane just purchased using CIA covert funds.
That was the plane that was sitting there waiting for us to take it back to California. Or actually, we were going to take it back to Bermuda Dunes, where Ernie Dunleavy, there at the Bermuda Dunes Aircraft Company, was going to do a top overhaul on it to make sure that it was in good condition. So we went out, and I dropped off Chanty there, and it's interesting that Dwayne January, who at that time was the manager of that airport, he still remembers that plane very well. And the reason he remembers the plane very well is the fact that the painting was on it. It had been owned by a gear company, and it had a beautiful rendering of a huge gear that took up the entire tail on this aircraft. And he remembers it, and he also remembers it because of the fact that Chanty spent so long running the engine up that he had a complaint from the residents around there that he was making too much noise. So, but that was his job to do that. So then I went back, and when I came back to Dealey Plaza this time, the pickup truck was there.
It was now about 10:30 in the morning.
I took the satchel holding all the IDs, and I put them in the pickup truck, locked it, walked away. About 11 o'clock, a person who I had never met Homer Echeverria, but he had been introduced to me. I mean, I'd seen pictures of him, and it appeared that's who it was. Came, got in the pickup truck, and drove off.
A few minutes later, Chauncey noticed some suspicious activity in the parking lot behind the grassy knoll.
Now, while I was there were several other cars that were in and out and the parking lot that had people in them that, at least one of whom I knew very well. One of the persons who drove in sat at the entrance for a long time and then left was an individual by the name of Aldo Vera Serafin, who was one of the foremost assassins in the world.
Chauncey observed him talking on the radio, back and forth.
Yep, it looked like he's clicking the mic and so forth and talking on it and so forth. And then after a while, he left, drove out of the parking area.
According to Chauncey, Serafin was a freelancer, an assassin for hire.
He was freelance. He worked for anybody who would.
Chauncey was ordered to stay in the area of the Plaza. Twombly told him some sort of staged pro-Castro demonstration would take place.
Sort of in a support position, almost like an observer, I guess. So I strolled up by the, almost up to the corner of Houston and Elm Street. I was on the south side. I never actually got up there. And I looked over there, and I saw quite a few Latin types. I saw individuals that I had seen in the past. One of them, of course, was Luis Posada, who was another assassin. Freddie Lugo, who was also another world-class assassin. And of course, I thought I saw Orlando Bosch. The FBI said later on, couldn't have been Bosch. Bosch wasn't there because we had him under such tight surveillance. But I certainly wouldn't believe the FBI. So he was up there. Other individuals that looked, I thought that I saw Rip Robertson. He was another, he was a CIA contract agent. But I hadn't seen him since '54. So, it might have looked like him. Another individual I thought I saw was a guy named Tony Poe, stood for Tony Posfany. But there again, he really wasn't, because later on, he told me, I saw him later on, and he hadn't been out of Southeast Asia. But it was somebody looked like him and wore that same, they had the floppy fatigue type stuff that they wore, the military type hat and so forth. So he was another mysterious looking guy that was over there. So they were over there, and they're wandering around Dealey Plaza for some purpose, and they had an unusual number of. I mean, it'd be hard to find at the Soldier of Fortune meet. It would be hard to find as many military types as was wandering around in Dealey Plaza. And of course, you really wondered about that. But after all, we were getting ready to have a demonstration, so I thought. So anyway, it didn't bother me too much. And of course, you're tempted to go over and talk to these guys, but then again, you're operating on a need-to-know basis, and so you leave these guys alone. You don't do anything about it.
Chauncey would learn later there were some other notorious individuals in Dealey Plaza.
I've always thought that it was some effort to, muddy the water. We got as many bad guys running around as you can possibly get, and they all seem to gravitate. It just seems to me more than coincidental that they would all show up in Dallas at the same time. And I think that if they had, if the Sheriff's Department, the FBI, or the Dallas Police Department, if they had done their job, that jail down there would have been full of nefarious characters with all kinds of reputations.
Chauncey was worried. His instincts told him something was up, but his orders from Twombly were clear.
I had these BATF credentials, and they were saying if there is any, if you have any trouble, you go and jump in this boxcar. They identified the boxcar. You get in this boxcar, which will appear to be locked. It'll have a seal on it and everything else, and sweat out what happens if they have some kind of a serious confrontation.
The boxcar was in a train yard behind the grassy knoll. It was the 9th car in a line of boxcars. But there was another order given Chauncey, an order for weapons.
Usually, almost all of the requests for armament of any kind, either just stock rifles, pistols, to silenced rifles, silenced pistols, almost all of it came from George Reynolds in Morgan City.
Reynolds told Chauncey to make a delivery.
I had instructions that I was to deliver some guns and some IDs to 2 other individuals, one of whom was Charles Harrelson, and another was an individual that I knew as Richard Montoya. Charles Harrelson, I had never met. He had been pointed out to me one time in John Mason's gun store by a guy I was with, and he said, that is Charles Harrelson, that he's a part owner in this gun store. Now, I had, later on, I did some false ID work for Charles Harrelson, except he was using the alias of Terry Southern at that time. So I'd seen his picture, so I mean, enough that you're pretty, after seeing him the one time and having his picture, I mean, you're a pretty good idea that, hey, this is the guy. So he walked up to me and he said, are you John O'Malley? And I said, yeah. And he said, I'm Charles Harrelson. I said, no, you're Charles Harper, because that was the name of the identification, was the name of Charles Harper. And so I gave them the ID, and then they had requested that I bring over a couple of guns for him and the other guy, who I'll get to in a minute. And so I gave him this Smith & Wesson Model 40, and I gave that to him. And the other guy was a guy named Richard Montoya. I had met him sometime before. I met him at the home of Orlando Piedra. Orlando Piedra had been formerly the chief of police of Havana. He was at that time living in this plush estate on Pine Tree Drive in Miami, and he was actually Batista's paymaster. So I'd met him. We went over to see Piedra about something, and this guy was introduced to me as Richard Montoya, and he spoke a very good Spanish. I assumed that he was probably an American-born person that spoke Spanish, because he didn't look, he didn't look like a Cuban. That he was probably one of Piedra's bodyguards, because he had a lot of them. So that was the second guy. So I gave him his ID, and then I and gave him the gun. I gave him the, so they took this and they walked away.
The crowds had begun to gather along the route in anticipation of seeing the President of the United States and the First Lady. It was noon. Chauncey was pacing in the parking lot behind the grassy knoll, waiting for the staged demonstration to begin.
I was told specifically by Philip H. Twombly that they were going to have this, he described it very specifically, that it was going to be a non-violent demonstration incident that would be laid to the door of the pro-Castro Cubans. I just assumed that included in there, if it's going to be something that's serious enough to inject some life into this thing, it has to be more than a few placards. That it's going to be more than those "We Hate Kennedy" placards, that they were going to have to do something, and I would assume that, hey, they're going to take a shot at that motorcade, and with the intention of not hitting anyone. Maybe that's why they were going to use the Manlinger Carno, because they couldn't be possible. They wouldn't know where they were going to shoot.
On the surface, the plan seemed simple. The demonstration would lead to public outrage.
You know that there's going to be a swell of public opinion is, hey, turn the screws on Castro. They'd have been yelling for them to invade Cuba and everything else.
The presidential motorcade was moving closer and closer. Chauncey could hear the crowd growing excited. It was 12:30.
When the shooting started at 12:30, then immediately after the first shot, which was a weak type shot, I realized that this was not any simple demonstration. You know, in addition to all the shots, people were screaming and carrying on and running in all these directions. I didn't actually see the shooting, although I was behind the picket fence within 25 yards of the motorcade, but I didn't see it.
Stand by just a moment, please. Something has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by, please. Put me on, Phil. Put me on. Something has happened here. We understand there has been a shooting. The presidential car coming up now. We know it's the presidential car. You can see Mrs. Kennedy's pink suit. There's a Secret Service man, spread eagle, over the top of the car. We understand Governor and Mrs. Connolly are in the car with President and Mrs. Kennedy. We can't see who has been hit, if anybody's been hit, but apparently something is wrong here. Something is terribly wrong.
Chauncey didn't see the president shot, but he sure heard something.
Oh, I heard it very well, and enough to know, first of all, that there was more shots fired than the three they claimed, and it seemed to me like that, you know, and being a, you know, somewhat of an expert, you know, on shooting, that the shots did not all come from the same direction. I am quite sure that the shots were from different caliber guns and from a different source, and I know that there's 4 shots and possibly 5 shots. It's very hard to distinguish shots that are fired with an automatic or semi-auto from, you can shoot them as fast that the sounds merge together. But I believe that there's probably 5 shots and that they came from different sources. It was just a fuselage of shots in a very, very short period of time. My first thing was to, hey, just get out of here, you know, just go over, mix with the crowd, you know, and go. But I had been given specific instructions, and when you're given specific instructions, that's what you do. I had enough time to just barely get to the boxcar, and when I arrived there, these two other individuals, known to me as Harrelson and Montoya, were already there. Indicated that they were close by, and we jumped in the boxcar, closed the door, and just settled down to wait everything out. There was a search party that came by many times, but this boxcar appeared to be locked. It had a seal on it, and they kept passing it up. We could hear them outside. We could hear their radios and so forth.
The three sat in the boxcar for over an hour, listening to a police radio receiver Chauncey had concealed in a brown paper bag. Then around 2:20 p.m., the boxcar started to move.
It moved up the tracks, and then it backed down the tracks and stopped. What actually happened was that the Lee Bowers, who happened to be the tower operator, which supervised all the movements in the yard, happened to see somebody jump on the train farther up, and he ordered the train stopped, and they backed down the tracks a little ways. We weren't too concerned about it at that time because of the fact that, after all, it was a switching yard. But suddenly they stopped, and for some reason they chose that time they didn't pass the boxcar up. So we heard them rattling at the door, and I immediately got out my BATF credentials because I certainly didn't want to have a bunch of trigger-happy cops dragging us out of there. So the minute they opened the door, of course, I flashed my credentials and said I was with the BATF, had a badge and that sort of thing, all the credentials. And D.V. Harkness was a sergeant for the with the Dallas Police Department. He was in charge of this detail. And another officer by the name of Roy Vaughn was almost like his second in command. So we identified ourselves, or I identified myself. I did all the talking. I identified and said, hey, we're with the BATF. We're working undercover. We're investigating this arms shipment, and it's in this boxcar. And he and Vaughn conferred for a little bit, and they decided that they would send us over to the little area that had been set up as investigative type office.
Like a command center or something?
Yeah, a little command center. They had the sheriff's department, they had the police department, they had the FBI. It was all there, and it was over at the sheriff's department. So he assigned two cops, Marvin Wise and Billy Bass, to escort us over. And we started over, and it was just like a leisurely walk. Didn't seem like it was anything urgent. Harrelson was in the front at that time, and he was just sort of strolling along like he was enjoying the whole situation. He was probably smoked up on something because he was a notorious narcotics user. So then he suddenly changed to Montoya, went by him, and Montoya got in front. So they took us around the plaza by the Texas Book Depository.
They were headed to the sheriff's command post near Elm and Houston. Once there, the three were interrogated briefly and released. These men would later be called the Three Tramps.
They were taking pictures of everybody in sight, and incidentally, there's a lot of guys with pictures that they ended up taking their pictures that they still aren't sure who they were. I mean, one guy, they picked him up. They took a picture of this one guy. I mean, he's dressed in all in black, almost like a ninja. They still don't know who that guy was. There's a picture of one guy that the police are putting in a police car, and he's a military type looking guy, you know, very fit, had that crew haircut on. They're putting him in there, and they've been trying to identify this guy for all these years, and they haven't been able to. He just got lost in the shuffle like everybody else did.
While a number of suspects were questioned within minutes of the shooting, that wasn't the case for Chauncey, Montoya, and Harrelson. They were detained 2 hours later. Just look at the shadows in the photos. It's clearly late afternoon.
The pictures were taken by reporters, from the newspaper reporters, as we were walking around. They took pictures of us all the way around that plaza. You'll see there's a lot of them walking in front of the school book depository.
Chauncey Holt's claim to be one of the so-called 3 tramps has been documented elsewhere.
There is more than just Holt's word. There is also his face.
It's just too close.
Lois Gibson is the Houston Police Department's forensic artist. She made comparisons of Holt and the tramp in the photographs.
This is just conclusive to me that that's the same man.
She also compared pictures of Charles Harrelson with the tramp photo. Again, a perfect match.
I'll stake my reputation on it for sure.
Looking at the feet of the tramp, you will notice he has a distinctive walk, toes pointed outward. The same characteristics possessed by Chauncey. Chauncey developed his unmistakable gait as a result of his earlier years on the circus high wire. Off camera, Chauncey hints at the use of disguises in covert operations. Phil Twombly told Chauncey to dress the part of a working man.
I was instructed to just blend in with the other individuals that were there, and the workers that were in the yards.
So Chauncey, in his working man's clothes, along with his boxcar companions, were led to the Dallas County Sheriff's Command Post in the Criminal Courts Building.
The deputy sheriff that was in charge of sort of a preliminary type investigation was a guy by the name of David Elkins. So they took us up there and had a few words with him, and he called over to the police department, and Will Fritz, who was the chief homicide detective and was really in charge of the whole thing, came over and told Elkins, turn him over to Gordon Shanklin of the FBI.
Chauncey was briefly interrogated by Gordon Shanklin of the FBI. Chauncey's fake credentials from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms came in real handy.
So he looked at him, he was sort of convinced. He asked us a few questions, which didn't seem like he was too much interested. He wanted to know how long we'd been in the boxcar. We said 2 hours. He wanted to know, did you hear the shots? No, we didn't hear the shots. What were you doing? Why'd you have the door closed? Yeah, because we didn't want anybody from the outside knowing what we were doing. Were you aware of what was going on? No. What were you doing all this time? Oh, we were looking at the paperwork, and we were inventorying the arms and ammunition.
Shanklin asked if Chauncey and his 2 associates were armed. They were.
The 2 guns I had were very unusual. One gun was a shorty 45. It was a 45 that was just simply cut down. They had taken all national match parts. They cut down the slide. They cut down the grip. They cut down everything about it. Otherwise, it was just like any other 45, except it had a hell of a kick. And that was one, and of course it was hard chromed, and it was very, very unusual gun. I would probably $2,500, $3,000 worth of gunsmithing in it. The other gun that I had was technically it was a Simmerling L22. It was usually referred to as the Lickman because he was the guy that designed it. It was a very small 45 that was as small as the 25, because you can see in the pictures it's laying beside the 25 and it's no bigger. But it wasn't a semi-automatic. What you had to do, you'd fire a shot and then you'd rack it, fire again, rack it, like that. But it was and of course it was accurate up to about 25 yards and had one hell of a kick. Well, these were rare guns, and they were very interested in the guns, and he asked me if I'd mind if they photographed the guns, and I said no. So they photographed the guns. They gave them back to us, and it was only years later, through an ex-FBI agent, that I managed to get a hold of the pictures. He got the pictures for me, although he couldn't find the negatives in the files, but he did send me the contact print.
Shanklin bought Chauncey's story and told the three men they were free to go.
Once Oswald was arrested, I mean, the FBI took no more interest in finding anybody, because within 15 minutes, J. Edgar Hoover had already declared that the president had been shot by a communist-carrying terrorist. And once Oswald was captured, that was the end of the game.
Chauncey noticed someone he knew at the command post. It was a mafia courier.
As I was walking out, actually, as we were walking in, Gene Braden, who was a organized crime figure, happened to be walking out. And I knew him. He had been detained temporarily. I knew him because, and I'd seen him just the past week. I knew him because we shared offices in a building at the corner of San Vicente and Wilshire in Beverly Hills. So I had seen him the week before, and he indicated that he was going to be in Dallas, going to be staying at the Cabana. Said, hey, why don't you come by and have a drink? So I knew he was there, but I didn't give any indication of knowing him. He didn't give any indication of knowing me, which of course I suppose was, it would have been disastrous if we hadn't, because here I am, he knows me as Moon. I'm using an alias of John O'Malley in this particular operation. He had changed his name from Gene Braden to Jim Braden, and he had been arrested under that name, Jim Braden. And suppose I'd run in and say, hi, Gene. You know, he said, hey, hello, Jack. I could see that there would have been they had scooped us up in a hurry.
Jim Braden, an ex-con on parole, was in the building across from the school book depository, the Daltex building. He was there, he says, to make a phone call. Braden was also taken into custody and released. Outside the command post, Chauncey headed toward the nearest telephone.
There was a lot of sleazy bars and so forth along in there, so I walked down there and went in to use a telephone. I didn't want to go over in the Daltex building or any of those buildings. I wanted to get as far away from Dealey Plaza as I could get. But on the other hand, I wanted to find out what they had told, what they had talked about, you know, with Jim Braden. I knew he was at the Cabana, so I called over and I spoke to him.
Braden said the police questioned him and let him go. Chauncey asked Braden if he wanted to fly back to California with him. Braden declined. But he offered Chauncey a ride to Redbird Airport. Chauncey accepted. Braden would later leave Dallas by way of Love Field.
Everybody scattered to the wind.
Chauncey and fellow pilot Joe Chanty took off to the Grace Ranch in Tucson, where they refueled before returning to California.
Joe Chanty, who was the pilot that had gone with me, we really didn't talk too much because, you know, you were just reflecting on everything that happened, and it was almost all the way into Tucson. I mean, it was he attended to the flying, and I handled the radio, but you know, I was just actually alone with my thoughts. I really wasn't interested in talking at all. The Kennedys seem to be a group of individuals that like to live on the edge. When you are in that business and you use your power, you are going to provoke someone else equally as powerful. Somebody put it together very masterfully.
After the assassination, Chauncey kept a low profile. In December, he got a letter from Peter Licavoli. The mob boss wrote Chauncey, quote, to wish him a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Hope 1964 is better than 1963. The letter made Chauncey uneasy because Licavoli knew Chauncey was in Dallas when JFK was murdered. Chauncey wondered what else Licavoli knew about the events of November 22nd. Chauncey had a good reason to be jittery.
My father-in-law called me up from Beverly Hills and said there was two very mysterious gentlemen looking for me. And they had the information on my car, which is a new Cadillac with Arizona plates, which wouldn't be hard to spot. They had the VIN number on my airplane that I owned personally. And of course, the first thing I thought about was Dallas. I didn't know whether it was the cops, or whether it was somebody just going to cut the umbilical cord.
Chauncey contacted his ally, attorney Frank Belcher. Belcher advised him to see his associate, Joseph Ball.
So I went down, and Joe Ball happened to be in Washington because they had formed the Warren Commission, and he was appointed as a senior counsel to the Warren Commission. So he wasn't there, but his one of the senior partners, Hunt, talked to me. And I told him my story. I told him I was there. I had nothing to do with the assassination and so forth. And he didn't. He just took a sort of an insouciant attitude. He didn't seem to be concerned. Said, "Don't worry about it." He said that Joe had been appointed to the Warren Commission, and it had been formed for the sole purpose of proving beyond doubt that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin. And anything aside from that was going to be pushed under the rug, you can believe me.
Chauncey realized the fix was in.
Already a game plan for the Warren Commission, and this was in December of '63.
In January 1964, Chauncey received a letter of assurance from Frank Belcher. The letter reads, I spoke to Joe Ball today and went over the gist of your conversations with Mr. Hunt. Joe assures me there will be no legal problems resulting from the activities in Dallas.
If Belcher said something, I mean, he made a promise, you know the Ball would carry through.
Joseph Ball was busy with his duties as senior counsel for the Warren Commission.
His duties involved one certain aspect of the investigation, which fortunately included Dealey Plaza and what happened inside the book depository. That's where his expertise came in. Although he did do some questioning regarding the shooting of Officer Tibbet, but he's mainly confined with that portion of it. It was designed to show that, hey, Oswald was up there. He did the shooting all by himself.
Joseph Ball also managed another sensitive area of the investigation, the testimony of eyewitnesses and the police who said they had encountered Secret Service agents in Dealey Plaza.
Mr. Sorrells testified, and his testimony was supported by other agents as well, that there were no Secret Service agents on the ground.
According to the special agent in charge of operations in Dallas, there were no agents on foot in Dealey Plaza. All Secret Service personnel were assigned to the president's motorcade.
The other individuals, several other individuals, indicated that they saw and were stopped at various times by people who were carrying Secret Service identification, and this was behind the picket fence and it also happened in the rear of the book depository. From all of this, my only conclusion can be that someone had forged Secret Service identification and that they were using. Either we did it at our studio or someone else did it. I would probably would be willing to make book that it was the Secret Service ones that we had produced a few days before.
Jean Hill was the closest eyewitness to Kennedy's murder, just feet from his limousine, across the street from the grassy knoll. She says she saw someone shoot the president from the knoll, and like many others, she ran to chase the man. Then she was stopped by a man who had Secret Service credentials.
He had shown me some ID, Secret Service. He
Did
said,
it say Secret Service?
yes, sir.
A more disturbing aspect of the Warren Commission's work became apparent to Chauncey years later. In 1970, Joseph Ball had hinted to Chauncey that tampering with the evidence had occurred. The Dillard photo was one prime example. The photo shows the window just below the sixth-floor window where Oswald was alleged to have fired from. This picture was taken by the Dallas Morning News photographer following the president's motorcade. It was taken about 15 seconds after the last shots were fired. Ball suggested to Chauncey, without elaborating, that the Dillard photograph had been altered.
They weren't about to entertain any other theory at all. If it was a credible witness that gave them testimony that didn't agree with their preconceived ideas, they just didn't hear him.
Chauncey had mixed feelings when he learned that some persons or person were intent on not revealing what really happened on November 22nd.
I thought that our role was so peripheral that undoubtedly you could put a pretty good spin on it. You know what I mean? And so it was a great relief, although you still didn't feel that we're actually in the clear, because in the back of my mind is these two guys who were looking for me.
Chauncey decided to leave the country while the Warren Commission deliberated. On January 12th, Frank Belcher wrote Chauncey. He recommended Chauncey take advantage of a safe house in Mexico that Belcher and Joseph Ball owned.
They owned a lot of properties together, including a safe house in Acapulco, next door to Las Prisas, that was used by contract agents of the CIA, card-carrying agents, CIA, high-level organized crime figures such as Licavoli, John Roselli, Giancana, Doc Stasher, all those guys. So they were really joined.
The Belcher letter to Chauncey continued, quote, "Let me know when you want to use the Acapulco house. As far as I know, the house is empty. Call Jorge and let him know when you would be arriving." The letter is signed, "Best regards, Frank Belcher." So Chauncey and two other CIA contract agents flew to Acapulco.
Beautiful house. And so while we were there, I got a letter from Ernie Dunleavy, who was Ray Ryan's partner and handled all the operations that dealt with aircraft. I got a letter from Ernie Dunleavy that said there's a couple of guys there looking for me.
He tells Chauncey, "They said they were friends of yours, but I have my doubts."
So I could see that they were, for some reason, somebody was really interested. So I decided that I called up Philip Twombly and told him, I'd like to make myself scarce. He said, well, call up these your colleagues at the proprietary interest that you have and see if they can handle things. So I called up Tony Materna at the Los Angeles Stamp and Stationery Company. He assured me that he wouldn't have any trouble carrying on. I called Dewey Martin, who ran the our modification plant in Goleta, and he said no, production would continue. He'd get his orders directly from George Reynolds, and Ernie Dunleavy said, you know, I can handle everything down here. So I called everybody that I knew had worked with the JM Wave. I called Larry Downs, Tom Franklin, Philip Custer. All these were high-level CIA individuals there.
JM Wave was the huge CIA facility in South Florida that organized and supplied the CIA's secret war against Cuba.
Then I started shopping around to get a new front, something or get a new assignment.